Hello, my name's Mark Saunders and this is a YouTube video presentation on focus groups. It's one of a number of YouTube video presentations on focus groups, and more widely it's one of a series of video presentations on research methods on my YouTube channel Mark Saunders on Research Methods, and you can see the link for this on the bottom left hand side of each screen, and please do subscribe. In this video presentation, I'm going to start off by looking at the benefits and drawbacks of doing group interviews, and within this we need to remember that a focus group is a particular type of group interview, so we could see it as a subset of group interviews. We're going to look at the role within focus group of the moderator. That's a person who actually looks after and makes sure the focus group stays focused, and then we're going to look at how we prepare for and actually operationalise our focus groups, thinking of the environment in which we wish to undertake the focus group and the composition of the actual group itself, so what sort of people we want to get in order to get people to talk about the particular aspect we're focusing on. And then we're going to finish up by just focusing down on thinking about actually running a focus group and the moderator working in practice. And of course, as always, there will be further reading. Let's start off by looking at the benefits of group interviews in general, and obviously these benefits apply to focus groups. The first benefit is one that we get a wide variety of views in one interview. Now, we can't say which views are more or less important. All we can really talk about is the breadth of views that we get, and that's the focus we're aiming for. So it's quite helpful if we want to design a questionnaire later. And by interviewing people together, we save time. And one of the beautiful benefits of group interviews is that as people are talking, their ideas influence what other people are thinking about, and so you get new thoughts being triggered in each other. And then we can test our ideas with the groups. Obviously, there are also drawbacks, and one of these drawbacks is the dynamics of how groups work with each other. So what we actually see is that some people take control and people don't want to be seen as disagreeing, and so we get problems there. We also get people who are loud and basically won't shut up. They want to talk and take over the group. And then we have people who are quiet and won't say anything at all. And we move to things like groupthink, where people actually all start to think and answer the same way, and that then takes away that benefit of getting the variety of views. There's also response bias, so people in a group trying to answer to look good or to actually make themselves better than somebody else. And this is even more important when we have a variety of different people in the group, so we need to think very carefully about the composition. Managing a dozen people talking at once and about different things as the moderator can be difficult. And of course we then have to think about how do we transcribe the data we're collecting when we're trying to attribute different comments to different people, and we have to just do that by, if we've only used audio recording, with different voices. Let's start off by looking at the differences between group interviews and focus groups. Both group interviews and focus group interviews are undertaken by one person. In group interviews, the interviewer, and in focus groups, the moderator, and up to 12 participants. We can have two interviewers or two moderators as well, and I've found working with my colleague David, especially with focus groups, that to have two moderators makes a big difference in terms of managing the group. Group interviews are non-standardised interviews, normally semi-structured, and they're conducted with two or more participants. In contrast, focus groups interviews are the same as group interviews, but they're facilitated by a moderator, and we have a very, very clearly defined topic, which is the focus of the discussion between the participants. And so rather than asking a lot of questions, the purpose of the moderator is to actually to get people to discuss things and to keep them focused on that particular topic. So now let's focus actually on focus groups themselves. These are semi or unstructured. That means we normally start with a checklist of topics we want to cover, or we may have some starter questions and then probes, but we don't script it entirely. We've got two or more participants, and the participants are the focal point of what we're actually looking at. We need to bring the participants together in a way that they don't inhibit or stop each other from talking about topics. So if we're doing work in an organisation, it's not a good idea to have a senior managers and other employees in the same group, because the other employers will be inhibited from talking about things and saying what they really believe in case they look bad in front of their managers. And we have to make sure that everybody is actively encouraged to participate. The topic, or not surprisingly it's called a focus group, the focus is determined by ourselves as a researcher, and we define it very precisely with our participants. And then as the moderator, we focus on enabling this discussion between participants. So let's actually start to move into a little bit more detail about this. Let's look at the moderator role, and you'll see on these slides the moderator is a female and dressed in red, and you just saw her fly across the slide. Your role as moderator is to create a welcoming environment where participants feel comfortable, willing to talk, and it's inclusive. We're bringing them in to be part of the discussion, and we want to create this environment where they can express their opinions both openly and honestly. So that then links into our reassurances of confidentiality and anonymity, and making sure that participants know they will not be discussing what other people said outside the focus group. Once that's been done, you as moderator need to facilitate and direct the discussion. So you're guiding people and keeping them on track, but what you're not doing is telling them what to say. So it's a very difficult thing to do well. I would strongly suggest, if you are running a focus group, you practice with friends first of all. You manage the group dynamics, so the discussion flow. You encourage people who are quiet to speak up, so say, and what do you think? And when you have participants who want to take over, you have to think of ways of gently quietening them down to allow others to speak. As the moderator, you need to be neutral, so you cannot say what your own opinion is, and you cannot ask leading questions. You also need to recognise that in the focus group, people are giving up their time. So if you said you can please really participate in a focus group that will only last an hour, you need to make sure that that focus group stays on schedule and it only lasts an hour. The other thing you're responsible for is actually making sure the data is collected. So looking after the audio recording, and I would strongly suggest also taking notes in case the recorders don't work. So let's look at this actual process, and we're going to start off by thinking about the environment, so where the focus group is actually going to take place, and we'll come back that later. Then there's issues about the invitation. How do you actually gain physical aspects to participants? How do you write the letter saying please take part in the focus group? How do you find these people? And you'll see a QR code has appeared, and there's another YouTube video which talks about that. We then move on to issues of the composition of the focus group, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. But the crucial thing is to have a group of people where they will interact and feel safe to interact. There'll be issues of compensation. Should you actually pay people for taking part in the focus group? How much should that be? And this is obviously going to be dependent upon the local conditions, but also what your university ethics processes allow you to do or not to do. You then need to prepare a checklist of questions, and again we have a YouTube video which actually talks about that in relation to focus groups. And then finally we need to think about audio recording and the moderation process as it actually happens, moderation in practice. Let's now look at the environment in a bit more detail, and the first thing to think about is, are you going to do an online focus group or are you going to do it in person? If you're doing online, you cannot control the environment as well as if you're doing it in person. And you need to think about how are people going to sit around a table? Where are you going to sit as moderator? And those issues, as well as is the place going to be quiet? Are people going to be interrupted? And things like that. And you want a place where people will not be interrupted. It's obviously easy to access, quiet, and people will feel it's a neutral, safe environment. Is it convenient? Can they get to it easier? Think about the layout of the chairs and the tables so you can see everybody and they're sitting around. And also think about how are you going to use technology to audio record or even audio video record, remembering that if you're video recording as well, it's very difficult for people to feel so safe and willing to open up because they're actually being videoed rather than just their voice. We also need to think about the group composition and choose a group so it doesn't inhibit contributions. So you don't want people who are very different. So in the picture we can see here we have 3 people wearing safety helmets, so it looks like we've got workers and then we've got managers in the same group. Workers are far less likely to actually be able to say anything because their contributions will be inhibited if their managers are sitting there, because they may not want to look bad in front of their managers. So we have what we call a power dynamic going on. So we want similar participants. So within an organisation we take a horizontal slice so people are at the same level. Let's now look at audio recording and the role of the moderator in practice. The first thing to say is we only ever audio record with express permission from participants. So we actually ask them, is it okay to record? We do not have a recorder hidden and record them without permission. It's unethical. We encourage, as moderator, every person to participate and say all people's views are important. And at the start of the focus group, we ask each person to introduce themselves. And we say, please introduce yourself for the audio recording, because then we've got the different voices and it's easy to see when different people are talking as we transcribe the focus group. We obviously need to encourage people's contributions by drawing in those who are reluctant to talk into the discussion. We also need to stop people talking over one another and ensure everybody has the opportunity to contribute. So if we look at our focus group now, we have the moderator there, and if 1 or 2 people dominate, she wants to reduce this by encouraging others. So she may say something like, what do other people think about this? Or if she's trying to be more specific, what do you think about that, Gemma? Or perhaps, how does Luca's point relate to the one you raised, Vino? So bringing in other people into the discussion. As usual, I'd like to finish with further reading. And Brinkman and Cavell's book, Interviews, Learning the Craft of Qualitative Research Interviewing, is a fantastic book on interviewing, and there's so much useful information there on how to actually ask questions well. One of my favourite books on focus groups is Kruger and Casey's book, Focus Groups, A Practical Guide for Applied Research. And if you're looking at my book I wrote with Phil and Adrian, Research Methods of Business Students, focus groups are discussed in Chapter 10.